I was running out of money, couldn't pay for food. And so I started Ubering, and that's how I was able to make ends meet, is I kept opening new credit cards and running up my debt, and then Ubering to pay for my bills. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is a lot of times when we talk about campaigns, we talk a lot about campaign finance, which is really like we need to end Citizens United. That's part of the reasoning why the Supreme Court hasn't moved to having their to being televised yet, is they don't want Supreme Court justices to get into a place where they're performing rather than really discussing and asking the questions they need to ask. I feel like a lot of times in politics, people want to make you choose a side. Like, are you for the steps forward, or are you for the end result that we need? Pick one. And that's just such a load of BS.
Hi.
Hello.
Ooh. Can you hear us?
Hey, how y'all doing?
Hey,
Doing
Congressman.
well.
Nice hat.
Thank you. Appreciate it. How you doing?
We're doing
We're
great.
We're all doing
good.
well.
How are you? How are you feeling about the upcoming night?
I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. I was on the road for about 2 weeks and got back 2 days ago, and I do feel good. I've been in like every battleground state many times. I'm feeling good about things for Tuesday. And I'm in Florida, so I'm tracking our Florida stuff, and I feel good about our abortion ballot initiative too.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, what races are you watching? What races are Congressman Frost keeping an eye on that other people might not be?
So I'm paying very close attention to control the House, obviously, because being in the minority sucks, and I don't live in the minority anymore. So I'm paying attention to our key races in California and New York. So like Will Rawlings, I like a lot of those folks. And then I'm also paying attention to a lot of our frontline seats of people who won but were on nobody's radar. And a really big one is Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez in Washington State.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't know if y'all noticed, like somebody lit a ballot box on fire in like one of the most Democratic precincts. She won this race by like a few hundred votes. So like that action, we don't know who did it, but I don't know, I have my suspicions. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
It's a big deal for her race. So I actually just called her yesterday. I was like, what can we do? So a lot of the frontline races, and then here in Orlando and in Florida, we actually have an opportunity to break the Republican supermajority. There's like 6 state legislature seats that Biden won that Republicans are in, and 4 of them are in my district. So we've been working hard at flipping them. So yeah, I'm in my car right now because I'm at a wrestling match, and they let me on stage to tell everyone to go vote, and so we were there, telling people to go vote at the wrestling match, which is pretty sick.
Cool.
How are you? I feel like people have changed some of their tunes since seeing the Seltzer poll in Iowa. Were you surprised when that poll came out?
I was a little surprised, yeah. I was a little surprised by it. I mean, that's a really good showing in Iowa. And, I know the Trump campaign came up right away and was like, well, our poll says he's +5. Well, even if he's +5,
right?
That is kind of still good for us in terms of Iowa and where he was in 2020. So I'm feeling good, but also I'm at the point where, this is the point where I kind of start to tune out the poll. I'm like a big poll nerd, but over the last few days, I kind of try not to pay attention anymore and just kind of, lock in.
What about the Senate? What do we think there? There have been some very competitive seats, obviously Tester in Montana, some decent polls in Texas. What are your thoughts about the state of the race? So, this Senate map is the worst Senate map Democrats have had in about 40 years. So that's like we can kind of ground ourselves in that. What I will say, though, is I think it's going to be really close. I think we're not 100% sure where it's going to go. I'm feeling really good, though, about holding most of our seats that, people thought we were just going to completely lose. I think if I were to say what I'm most worried about Tester, and I'm most worried about, I was just in Ohio with Sherrod Brown. I think most people would categorize his as the second most vulnerable. Being out there, though, the energy was super high. I actually met a lot of conservatives that were supporting him, and I was on college campus. I met like young conservatives who were out there knocking doors for Sherrod. So I feel optimistic about it, and obviously, I hope Tester comes through because we really need to control the Senate. If he weren't, though, looking at Osborne in Nebraska, which is kind of crazy, but would be great. And then, all red, and then obviously Darren McCarcel-Powell here in Florida. So
Yeah, Senate math is tricky, but I don't know. Like I feel like maybe we can hold on. Like I really want to hold on to it because like I actually want to like get shit done. So
Yeah, there were some polls that show Rick Scott, I think, only up 1 point on McChrysler Powell, right? So there's a chance.
Exactly.
What do you think? Are you hopeful? I mean, I know it's tough, but
it's tough, but I am hopeful. Look, like people don't realize that number one, Florida Democrats, we've kind of not done a good job for a long time, and then now we're finally doing a good job. But it takes time. But I'll tell you this: Debbie's the first Latina, Spanish-speaking Democratic statewide nominee we've ever had, which is crazy.
wow.
And so she's the first person that can go as a Democrat that's been able to go on advertisements and kind of like fight back this Republican talking point that like we're the authoritarians. And you know, it doesn't matter if you're a moderate or progressive. If you're in Florida, you're gonna be called a socialist, a defund the police, like every word you can think of. And for so long, Florida Democrats would hear that charge and then spend all of our money and all of our time on ads that said, "No, I'm not." And "No, I'm not" is not a good message. Like, "No, I'm not" is not a compelling message. And so Debbie, for the first time in a while, is running a statewide campaign where it's not "No, I'm not." It's "This is what I am. This is what I'm for." And you want to talk about authoritarianism? Look at Rick Scott. Look at Donald Trump. Look at Ron DeSantis. And so I think, like, and that's honestly during the primary, I endorsed her in the primary and I asked her straight up, I was like, Debbie, are you going to run the typical, like, Florida Democrat, "No, I'm not" campaign? Or are you going to, like, talk about this shit we're for? Because most people are with us on the issues, but they're not with us on the politics. So we need to switch up the politics. And she said yes. And that's why she's polling the way she's polling. We just did a rally with John Ossoff, and he came up and said, "Listen, I don't call it the margin of error. I call it the margin of effort." And I was like, I'm stealing that. I'm taking that. So she's in the margin of effort. She's in the margin of effort. I think she can do it.
It's exciting. I tell you, it's cool to have a chance, you know, and even in Texas too. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but obviously you guys have to plan for if you do win in the House and take over in the majority. What do you think we could look forward to on oversight, for example? Because you guys have been chomping at the bit to actually do something of value instead of trying to go after the Biden crime family nonsense. So what are you excited about if you get the majority? I'm not going to jinx it, but if you were in the majority, what are you excited about?
If I'm in the majority, yeah, I'm excited about not wasting our time looking at Marjorie Taylor Greene. Well, she'll probably bring it anyway. There's been 3 times that she's shown on a poster board pictures of Hunter Biden's nudes. So I'm hoping that there won't be relevant, you know, but either way, I've spoken a lot with Jamie Raskin about this. I think, you know, we really have to go into making sure that we protect our democracy in states as well. And I held an ad hoc hearing my first year in Congress, last year, where we focused in on like what's going on Florida, what's going on Georgia, like book banning, the removal of elected officials because they disagree with them. And I think Oversight Committee has a really good and very important role to play in actually focusing on that. The second thing is like doing our job, what we're supposed to do, which is oversight of the federal government and making sure we can be more efficient. We have not done any of that. Everything has been culture wars and all that BS. And the other thing that's really important to my state that is a huge problem in California now as well, and it's becoming a big problem across the country, is looking at the housing crisis, and specifically, we need to conduct a lot of oversight on insurance, homeowners insurance, and it's been killing people all across my state, especially with all the hurricanes that we have. So there's a lot of work that we need to do, but I think, you know, the government oversight is important, but there's a lot of very specific issues that I think we can really kind of peel things back on and show the American actually going on as it relates to corporate greed and as it relates to a lot of the failures we're seeing of, yes, the federal government, but also state governments as well. And I think Oversight Committee has a really important role to play there.
Yeah,
Hi.
it'd be huge.
Sorry, I
No,
want to
please,
cut
go
in
ahead.
for a second.
Tuck in this one.
Yeah.
Hi. Okay, so.
No, the mic works fine. You can it was good.
Okay. Well, basically, just like you, I'm Generation Z, and I also live in Florida. And I think a lot of people around our age is very into politics, want to get more into it, but are really scared when it comes to the running side of portion. or the running side of things. A lot of it has to do with how Republicans react so negatively when Democrats mount a campaign, but I kind of just wanted to know your general thoughts and advice when it comes to young people our age who want to get into the House, want to run in local politics, but don't really know where to begin.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this question. Where in Florida do you live?
Right now I live in Miami.
I was sick. I was just in Miami last night. I did a rally with David McCarcel-Powell at Gramps in Wynwood. But either way, and it was really good. It was packed. Okay, so this is what I'd say. Number one, the reason why my year and a half of running for Congress was the hardest year and a half of my life was obviously I was running for Congress, but more than that, I really dealt with a ton of financial hardship that I wouldn't have otherwise had if I wasn't running for office. Obviously, I quit my job to run for Congress, and I thought I had enough money in the bank. I had money put away, but I didn't really have enough. When the rent hike moratorium got lifted in Florida, I got priced out of my apartment, and I experienced homelessness for 2 months. Then when I finally saved up enough money to get into an apartment, I was running out of money, couldn't pay for food, and so I started Ubering, and that's how I was able to make ends meet. Is I kept opening new credit cards and running up my debt, and then Ubering to pay for my bills. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is a lot of times when we talk about campaigns, we talk a lot about campaign finance, which is really like we need to end Citizens United. There's a lot we need to do. My North Star is public financing of campaign, but it's going to take some time to get there. But the thing we never talk about is the personal impact that, number one, keeps candidates down and from being able to really focus on their campaign. And number two, keeps people from running in the first place. Like, we don't have the data of how many people wanted to run but didn't because of this. And to be honest, if I had a family, if I had children I had to take care of, I would have dropped out of my race 4 months in when I first experienced that housing problem, which means that our system in and of itself is really making it's difficult for young people and working class families to be able to run for office and be represented there, because a lot of people who run for Congress are already rich, so they can afford to go a year and a half without working. They have the money in the bank to live, and they can focus 110% on winning this thing. And I'm going to be honest, I believe I won because we built a movement, because I had a message, and because we worked the hardest, and the people obviously voted for me. But I'm going to also throw in like I always say, I also won because a little bit of luck, and or like right place, right time. And the vast majority of people who run for office don't win, but the 98% of people who run for Congress are 98% of people who win their race for Congress are also the person who raised the most money. And so it just shows we have inherent flaws in our system, both in terms of campaign finance, but also like personally running for office. And so when people come up to me and they say, yo, I want to run for Congress, I want to run for school board, I want to run for this, what's your advice? One of the first things I tell them is think about your personal finances and like how you're saving up, or how you're going to make sure you're taken care of when you're doing this thing if you can't work. And if you do have to work a full-time job and you're running for Congress specifically, you might not be able to run the campaign you want to run because it's a really hard thing to do. So something has to give. And so when I first got to Congress, the first thing I did is we made some good relationships with folks that are commissioners on the FEC, and we worked hard, and I actually testified and told my story to expand the ability for candidates to get take a stipend so they can pay for their bills. And so we actually were successful in that, and the FEC passed a rule that candidates can take a stipend now when they file to run, which is a game changer to help working class candidates to be able to pay their bills. There are stipulations in there to make sure people don't take advantage of it. And the other thing that's really helpful is you can keep taking this stipend up until 2 weeks after the campaign, win or lose. And this is important because there's a lot of people who get to the end of it, right towards the end, right before they have to qualify for the ballot, and they say, damn, do I have a chance, or do I really need to bow out because I can't afford it personally? And now it gives people that, they can actually continue till the end and not worry about being in financial hardship. I don't think you should risk your whole financial stability to just raise your hand and say, what about me? Yeah. And when we're running for office, that's what we're doing. We're raising our hand saying, what about me for school board? What about me for Congress? And I think it should be easier. It shouldn't be easy to run for office, but it shouldn't be damn near impossible.
Damn, that's so cool. I was gonna ask, like, what you're coming to the end of the 118th Congress here. Like, what lessons did you learn as a freshman that you would tell a younger Maxwell Frost just getting doe-eyed into Congress?
Yeah, no, this is a really good question, and we've actually been very effective this Congress. I've gotten 2 pieces of legislation passed through the House through bigger packages. I have one that I just got passed through committee. That's really a piece of legislation that has to do with voting rights, which is kind of crazy to get through a Republican committee. And so we're still working on it. So we feel good about the work we've gotten done with the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. But what would I tell myself? I would say there are some key relationships that I've made with people on the other side of the aisle that I really got to foster and grow in my second year of my first term. And I wish I would have made a little bit more of a effort to do that at the very beginning, because I find that, the further on you get in the session, the more adversarial conversations you're having and debates you're having with people. And so at the beginning, when people are brand new, I think it provides a really good opportunity to be able to chat with people before you start really hating each other. and and I'd hope that, something I really learned is that oftentimes we know how divisive Congress is, how it's not really productive. No one works together. And we usually attribute 100% of that to the people. But after being there, I'm going to give the people maybe 60% of it, like the actual members of Congress. And I'm going to give 40% or 30% to the institution itself and what it rewards and what it doesn't reward. And what I mean by that is, for instance, orientation. This is like before we get started, before we start yelling at each other. You'd think it's the best time to get to know people on the other side. But really, you're only with people from the other side the first part of the day. And the first part of the day, you're in class. You're learning. You're not really supposed to talk. The second half of the day, which is more social things and learning, you're outside the classroom, you're divided by party. I mean, even walk into a committee room and you see committees, the whole purpose of it is for us to hold hearings to inform legislation and to work together. I remember walking into the oversight room and looking and being like, wow, we're not facing each other. We're facing the audience. There's an audience. There's cameras. And then I look up, and I know I went to art school. There are stage lights, stage lighting pointing at us. I mean, anytime I sit on committee, I feel like I'm walking on a stage. And to be honest, I am walking on a stage. Yeah. And so the way it works, and this is I think it's good that our committees are shown on C-SPAN and people can watch it. But the con from that is it's become a shit show in a place where people are just performing. That's part of the reasoning why the Supreme Court hasn't moved to having their to being televised yet, is they don't want Supreme Court justices to get into a place where they're performing rather than really discussing and asking the questions they need to ask. I'm not saying I think it should be televised, but just something we have to remember is it pushes members to perform. An oversight committee is a ton of performing. And so the system itself is set up to reward the Marjorie Taylor Greene showing a nude of Hunter Biden and being crazy, right? It's set up to reward these things, and it's not set up to reward having an honest to God conversation. And that's not to say, look, I mean, I have some clips out there, I'm gonna go in on these people when I need to, but I also spend a lot of time trying my best to have a real conversation with the person I'm questioning to try to inform, hopefully, the bill we can craft with other people. So that's a big learning thing for me.
I was going to thank you, Representative Frost. Do you have one last question, Loner?
Yeah, I was going to ask, one of the things I've noticed coming from the Harris campaign lately has been this phenomenon of otherwise Republicans, usually more moderate ones, moving away from the Republican Party and even endorsing Harris, if not just abstaining. I think when I went canvassing, I noticed quite a few people saying that, right-wingers who had decided that their top priority was no Trump. How much of that have you experienced just throughout the campaign?
I've experienced a lot of it. I actually I forget the name of the university. I think it was University of Northern Arizona in Flagstaff. And I went out there. We had a really good showing. And then afterwards, I think it was 2 students came up to me and they were wearing Republicans for Harris hats. And I was like, sick. I was like, why? What made you support the VP? I'm just curious. And they were like, well, honestly, a lot of it had to do with character. And we hate Trump. We think he's bad for our party. I actually have had a surprising number of conversations with students who came up to me and said, hey, I'm an independent. Hey, I'm a libertarian. I'm leaning towards Harris because of the environment. but what does she have to say on housing? And then I have that conversation. And so that's a real thing that's existing. And I think broadening this coalition is going to be really, helpful in hopefully winning this race on Tuesday. Something I always think about, especially as a Floridian, is long-term party building. And something we always have to keep in mind is this is really helpful for our election now. As we get into things and as we move on to the future and maybe the Republicans have a different nominee, how do we work at, having the real conversations and being in fellowship with a lot of these folks who, honestly, when I talk with a lot of them, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, dude, you're a pretty like liberal person, actually.
Yeah.
I'm just like, and so again, this is the difference. And I feel like Florida's a case study in this, the difference between politics and policy. If I put, expanding Medicaid, or like let's say if I put Medicare for all, if I put a bill on expanding background checks, like all these things that are considered very progressive or at least just like liberal or center left policies, if I put them on the ballot in Florida, they're going to win. Like honestly, 10 out of 10 of the times. But then a lot of those same people would then vote for Donald Trump or DeSantis on the same ballot. And so it's this difference between the policy that people are with us in states like Florida, but the politics, it's like that there's a disconnect, and that has to do with the politics of like the vibe people feel on the campaign and how people feel that you are. And I feel like the next 4 years, we have opportunity to do a lot of really good stuff in line with their values. Like I'm a progressive, I want progressive values, but also in terms of thinking about our politics, because again, when the nominee changes in 4 years for the Republicans, I mean, who knows, Trump might run again, if he's, I guess, still around or whatever, or I mean, still around in politics.
I think he will be. I don't think he's going anywhere.
He might run again.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm thinking is like if it's a Nikki Haley on the ballot, right? If it's like someone like that, we don't want to. Like I believe in as broad of a coalition as we can build, and then we have 4 years to work at bringing those folks in fellowship, and hopefully having those conversations where they're like, you know what, maybe I am a Democrat, maybe I am like liberal, and I think the next 4 years give us the opportunity to do that, and so. I'm always for broadening the coalition. I'm always for having people at the table who might not otherwise be there, not just because they're going to vote our way, but because after the vote, like what are we doing to make sure they stick with us through this? And there's going to be people who don't stick with us, and there's going to be people who do stick with us. And like my mind's already there a little bit, but like we got to win first, obviously.
I love it. I think we need to. You got to compromise. Like you're in a legislative body, and the goal is to work with everybody and come to solutions. And so I love to hear it. And I think you're in a great delegation in Florida because you have everything from Matt Gaetz to Anna Paulina Luna to Jared Moskowitz, and you as well, of course. So it's fascinating. And I actually think you guys did a brilliant job from the minority with these must-pass bills, getting more Democratic votes than Republican, and like the debt ceiling as well. So I think it was a great experience. I hope. I know it sucks to be in the minority, but you guys did a brilliant job, and I'm so excited for you guys to be in the majority. I'm hoping.
I appreciate it. I mean, that's me as a I always tell people, I'm a progressive, but I'm a progressive from the South. So sometimes I think about things a little differently, just because I'm not in California or New York where it's progressive Democrats versus moderate Democrats at the legislature. Like we're versus like fascists. It's a little bit of a different ball game, and so I have my North Stars that I believe in, but I also, I feel like a lot of times in politics, people want to make you choose a side. Like, are you for the steps forward, or are you for the end result that we need? Pick one. And that's just such a load of BS. I mean, if you study movement history, you know that these things, they're not identical, but they're indivisible. They work together to get to where we want to go. Yeah. The problem becomes when you let the steps forward and you let the incremental changes come at the expense of believing in or fighting for Medicare for all or the top thing we need. I don't let that happen. I talk about it all the time, but I also realize that expanding Medicare and Medicaid, that's going to be an important step that we need to get to a place where we expand it to every American. And I see that in the path, and I don't, and I know it's not going to happen tomorrow, but when it does happen, like one day we'll wake up and we'll be like, wow, it started off with, Bernie Sanders' campaign, him talking about it. He didn't win, but now most of the people coming to Congress, which is true for Democrats, are for universal health care and for Medicare for all. Like there's over 120 co-sponsors on the bill. Not all of them are progressives. And then years and years passed, and we just kept building our numbers. And then one day we woke up and we had the majority, and every Democrat was for it, and we had the votes, and we clicked yes, and everyone got health care. And to the world, everyone's going to be like, wow, that happened overnight. And then we'll all just kind of look at each other and smile because it was anything but overnight. That's like my theory of the case, and that's like my theory of change and how we get there. And so it'll take some time. I think we're closer than people think, not just on healthcare, but on everything. But we'll get there.
Can I ask a question? Can you hear me right now?
Yeah.
Hey, what's up? I'm Steve. We spoke before at an event prior. Yeah, so, so complaint / question / your thoughts, I guess. One of the biggest issues that I found is there's so much like excitement and there's so much motivation to do something, but I feel like it's really hard to get involved. So I'm pretty sure the only reason we're talking to you, I think, is because the canvassers that we have out working in Pennsylvania, I think managed to basically get us in contact. I did like kind of minimal pushing for this event. I got a lot of other stuff going on. I didn't even do as much as I could have, and they still managed to knock like 10,000 doors. I think they had conversations with almost 1,000 voters in that state. And these are just a few people from my community that are like involved in going out and going the extra mile. Is there any easy way to have infrastructure in place, or there's not? The answer is no. What I'm asking you is, can you push or bully or do whatever you need to do to make it so that if I'm an excited Democrat and I'm in a house in a state with a zip code, that I can like go to a website and click like use me or get me in a community to try to like find ways to enroll people into local political stuff? Because it's so hard to find that pipeline, it seems.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think part of the thing is there are places where it can be easy, right? Easier. For instance, if you get connected, there's certain organizations where you can hop on a dialer right now. Like you can just go onto their dialer. You can hop on. You can call voters in Pennsylvania, right? And certain organizations that do that. And so I think the problem is there's so many people doing the work that sometimes it's hard to find what website do I go to? What exactly do I do? And a lot of people will go to, KamalaHarris.com and sign up, and they'll want to engage you in person to go knock some doors and things like that. But there's more and more organizations doing distributive organizing, which is really important. I actually just kicked off a Kamala Harris phone bank with over 100 people in it. That was just a virtual phone bank, and it's people like sitting at home. So I'm with you on that. And actually, before Congress, I was the national organizing director at March for Our Lives, which is the organization that came after the shooting in Parkland. And I remember when I got hired, I was like, "Yo, I'm going to travel the country. We're going to be on the streets. This is going to be crazy." And then COVID hit. And I knew nothing about digital organizing. And I had a crash. I was running the organizing for this huge organization, and I kind of had to learn as we went, and we created a really cool way of people being able to be engaged at home and making it super, super easy. So March for Our Lives, I'd plug their work, I'd plug in Next Gen's doing some of that work, but also other organizations as well. But I'm with you. I think the more we can do to create, like maybe, there's one general website that can help funnel people to certain things that would be helpful. But yeah, I'm with you. We want to make it as easy as possible for folks. But people should, you can go on Kamala's website, or this takes a little extra work, but I do have to plug it because this is like the majority or not. Like if you go to the DCCC website, you can also sign up to volunteer there and find out like what frontline races you can call into and stuff like that.
Cool. Okay. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the answer.
Yeah.
Can I ask one last question?
Do you have time for one last question?
Just a quick one. I know you're a big.
I could do.
You're a big music guy. What do you listen to right now? What's some cool stuff that you're listening to?
Oh yeah. Music is so good right now. I mean, it's good all the time, but I'm really listening to, for people that know, I'm a drummer. My dad's a full-time musician, and I went to art school. That's what I wanted to do my whole life, and then something wrong happened in my head, and I got into politics. But I'm like religiously listening to this new album called Imaginal Disc by a band called Magdalena Bay, and like it's like a beautiful album. If you like. It's like alternative rock. It's pop. It's like there's like disco. It's a prog rock. It's everything. I just saw them like a couple months ago, and I'm a huge fan. So I'm listening to Magdalena Bay. I'm still listening to Brat. I'll probably kind of ease up. Well, because I just went to Sweat with my partner, and we had
Sweat. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was so sick. I had such a good time, and like It depends on the type of concert. You know, I had a hat on and I was wearing sunglasses indoors because that's what you do at Sweat. And so I thought no one would recognize me, but every single millennial gay there recognized me. So we were just having a lot of them would come and say, I hope you have a really good time tonight. You deserve it. And so it was a lot of fun. And then there's an artist named Leve, who she like blew up on TikTok, and I'm really into her because she is like the gateway drug for Gen Z to get into jazz. And I grew up playing jazz, and that's kind of the top, the music I love the most. And I'm just so obsessed with the fact that she's getting so many young people into jazz and that she's writing new jazz. And I grew up playing, and there's something called the real book when you're in jazz band. That's a book this thick of standards that are from a long time ago that are amazing. But that's like kind of what you play growing up, is you play the jazz standards from a long time ago. And I think it's so cool that there's like a young person making new jazz music, and like there's young people listening to it. I think that's really sick. So those are 3 people I'm like really into right now.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. It was awesome, and obviously we're all hoping for the best of luck for everyone on November 5th.
110%. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, see you later.
See ya.